talking with some of the adjudicators while we were mingling outside, there is some talk amongst the adjudicators about a drop-off in number of adjudications or the opportunities that they're getting to actually have a run at making decisions. And we were talking before about a bit of a sports analogy. You know, if you don't get a run on the field ever, you know, how do you get better at your craft? And so the question that I now have for our panel is, do you think adjudication is out of vogue, or do you think that's just anecdotal, that the observations being made by the adjudicators about the opportunities that are being presented to make adjudication decisions?
This is one of the ones I'm incredibly passionate about. I think it's way too complex. So it's gotten more complicated. The QBCC now has this vetting process, which I won't get into an argument over whether they're legally able to do it, but they do, and they make calls on what they believe is a valid claim or a valid application, and they give advice then to claimants as to whether they should withdraw or they shouldn't. So there is a number that are getting bounced at that point, based on the information I have had over a number of years, or last 2 years since this kicked in. But then also there's so many that are being found as no jurisdiction. So I think it's too complex for claimants to easily get it right, and then that is flowing through to adjudicators. Whether we have too many adjudicators in Queensland is probably a separate question, but I agree, if you don't if you don't get the opportunity to test it, and then you're having to relearn it. But there's been some decisions I've seen where people have missed some of the changes in the legislation, and that no doubt is exacerbated by the fact they don't get to look at it very often, and they do it in a very short time frame.
So I'll add to that I don't think it's out of vogue per se. I think it'll always have a place, but I think there have become real issues about cost and quality, and they're associated, two different things really. The quality is related maybe to the number of adjudicators and that type of question, which we'll talk about more later possibly. And the cost is really because of the legalese that's become involved in it. When it first started, it was all fairly straightforward, but as times developed and certain firms have seen that there's money in it, everyone's got on board, and now, you know, probably over half of an adjudication decision is all about jurisdiction and legal points, etc. And it's, I think, taken away from it. And so, while it's not out of vogue, but it makes it difficult for a lot of people because it's not maybe the cheap access that it used to be. And then, unfortunately, on top of that, you might get a bit of a decision that's lacking the quality that maybe it should have.
Yeah, look, I'll agree with Warren on that. I mean, I don't think it's out of vogue, but it has gone away from its roots, if I could put it like that. I have a very clear recollection of the QBSA roadshow in, I think it was probably 1999 in Cairns. Ian Jennings came up, Tom Sargent, the local regional manager. We were sitting there in a conference facility, and I was in the back of the room beside a fellow by the name of Ron Crew, who is probably well known to Mike with his laughing. The essence of where this legislation came from was to protect subcontractors to get paid. That was what it was all about. What has, of course, developed to is something well beyond that, to be now a quasi-judicial type litigation process. And I can only go back to the last adjudication I just finished, the eighth application in a row of what ultimately became 7 adjudications in Asiona and Monadelphous. We're talking millions of dollars and very substantive issues, which if it was litigated in a courtroom, the trial probably would have lasted a month. And you've got an adjudicator needing to decide it in 15 days. Well, okay, with an extension, I had 21. It's just not the right sort of forum for that sort of a dispute. If it can get back to what it was intended to be, I think that's its future and where it's going to go.